Why, hello there, old sports. Now, this was not a video I planned on making, because, I don't know, this isn't usually what I talk about on this channel. But after watching the newest episode of the Amazing Digital Circus, I just felt like I had to give my 2 cents, even if no one cares for them. I'm going to shove my pennies down your throat. That sounds weird. Anyways, I have a few things I would like to talk about for this video, and obviously, spoilers are ahead. Duh. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, click off now. Thank you. Have a good evening. Anyways, Kane is dead. What? Now, the first thing I want to talk about is the inevitable question that will come up of, is Kane actually dead? And I would feel pretty confident in saying yes. I feel like lots of people probably consider what he did last episode to be crossing the line, but honestly, I feel like if he crossed the line last episode, this is him just running straight past it and then stabbing everyone in the face, because that's pretty much what he did. There's always been a disconnect between Kane and the circus members for obvious reasons, and I don't ever see there being a way that they could have even bridged that gap, and I feel like what Kane did this episode kind of showed that he really doesn't care about them, and anything he was saying that he did care about them was just him trying to soothe his own ego. And I feel like the scene where Pomni kind of stands up to Kane, as well as the other members that were over there, I feel like that was them kind of getting their last little jab at Kane before he gets killed. I guess my point is that this moment was supposed to be their moment of catharsis, to basically stand up to the bully and put him in his place, even if just for a moment. Because even though Kane kind of took control back of the situation, quote-unquote, he still was not in control, at least of himself. And then also that line where he calls them freaks. Again, I feel like that's him stepping even farther over the line to where there's no going back from this. There was no reconciliation that could have happened. Because again, even though Jax did something really shitty, I feel like that moment at the beginning was kind of them saying, okay, that was bad, but we're either gonna rip each other to shreds or we're gonna be there for each other. And that's not something Kane ever could have done. He couldn't be there for them, because at the end of the day, his only goal was to serve himself. Now, I don't even think Kane was necessarily malicious until the end, but I feel like that's just, I guess what I'm trying to get across is that ultimately, even if he thought he was doing something good for them, he was doing it because it made him feel better. Because he probably could have tried to connect with the humans on a more personal level, but I just don't think that's ever something that crossed his mind, because that's just not how he thinks. He's not a human. He's an AI. Ultimately, I think Kane was supposed to be kind of a tragic antagonist, because that line he has at the end where he's like, I didn't ask to exist, that's pretty sad, to be honest. But again, even if he's going through his own issues, I think ultimately that was just something he couldn't get across, and unlike a person who can grow from their failures, Kane was kind of just built broken, as sad as that is to say. Again, I feel like he's supposed to be a tragic antagonist, but an antagonist nonetheless, and one that had to be dealt with. But we saw that before Kane even had his heel turn, that the circus was kind of just corrupting under his own, mental issues, and honestly, it might have been better for it to just kind of slowly decay, and for the void, just for the characters to find themselves in the void and try to build something from there, rather than live in Kane's broken world as he kind of collapsed in on himself. Moving on to how Kane died, I feel like there's obviously a bit more than him just getting deleted, because that obviously wasn't Kinger's intention, and he looked very confused. Or at least as confused as something can look that only has 2 eyeballs to emote, but you get my point. As dark as it is to say, I think Kane may have kind of brought upon his own end, in a sense. I think he didn't necessarily abstract, because I don't know if that's even something that can happen to non-humans, but I think in a way, he kind of just, like I said earlier, he kind of just collapsed in on himself, and he didn't even realize he was destroying himself until it was too late, hence the little, what? Before he just vanishes because he's gone. Because as Kinger's trying to mess with the code on the PC, what ends up happening is little images of Bubble and Kane kind of pop up, and it's implied that Kane and Bubble are they're just connected. So I feel like that was kind of Kane almost taking over the computer, and then from there something happened, he gets deleted, whether that be by his own hand or just bad random luck. And either way, he seems to be gone. And I understand why that would feel unsatisfying to some people, that Kane doesn't really have a end to his arc in a sense, but I feel like this was his end of an arc. He realized he couldn't cut it as the nice guy, he tried to go bad, he realized he wasn't finding any satisfaction from that either, because again, as sad as this is to say, Kane isn't a human, he's a computer, and he's just corrupted, he's just broken, he was just built wrong. The whole Chinese room thing in the last episode, I think, is supposed to kind of allude to and confirm the fact that Kane is not a human. He cannot think like a human. He is utterly disconnected from the people he's manipulating. And thus, since, like Bubble and King are alluded to, he's a faulty program in a sense. He never really had a chance, as unfortunate as that is to say. But again, that is just my interpretation. I'd be open to changing my interpretation if someone were to tell me some things that were able to change my mind. This episode is very fresh, and thus I haven't really had time to discuss it with anyone yet, so maybe you can change my mind, who knows? One last thing I wanted to touch on about Kane before moving on is that failure has always been part of his character. As Bubble alluded to, he was the broken one who kind of just cannibalized his sibling, if that intro gave us any clue to go about. Looking at his adventures, he also is shown to fail there as well, because obviously the characters don't really like them, they're a bit stereotypical, and even his magnum opus of the escape adventure from last episode is shown to be kind of full of holes, to put it another way. Because the only reason the characters and us, the audience, go along with it as long as we do, is because the characters are desperate, and we're desperate for information. And the thing is, it looked like we were going to get that from there, so we were willing to overlook some holes that were coming across us to try to get what we wanted. But at the end, when Kane pulls the rug out from under us, and you have time to look back, you can see the problems that were there. Another thing I wanted to bring up is Scratch, the first abstraction, and the idea of the fact that CNA wasn't even making the circus, they were making Kane, and I'm guessing the other AI that was mentioned is Abel. I'm guessing that's where that came from. Now, as Kinger said, Scratch was one of the people working on Kane who eventually made the circus, so he is kind of responsible for the circus via Kane, obviously. And something that stood out to me was that he apparently had a tumor in his brain. And I wonder if that is what caused the first abstraction, because Kinger specifically points out that Scratch was the first one to abstract. So what if, what if whatever happened when he got transferred into the circus, what if the tumor came with him in a sense? Kane tried to, quote-unquote, fix it, and, things did not go well. That's my running theory, at least. Because obviously having a tumor in your brain has been shown to cause behavioral differences, but I feel like there was a specific reason they wrote that into the script beyond just, oh, he was a bit kooky. Because I feel like that would be kind of borderline insensitive, so I feel like there was at least a reason for mentioning that. I also do think it makes a lot of sense that the first quote-unquote batch of people were the CNA employees who were making Kane, and then they ended up in the circus through whatever means. Then from there, the rest of the members kind of trickled in as they found the building. But the main thing about this section I kind of wanted to talk about is that I don't think the world building stuff matters as much, or at least it isn't going to be the main focus. Because the Digital Circus has always been more of a character-focused show and not a world-building show, if that makes sense. It focuses a lot more on the interpersonal drama and interactions between characters rather than trying to build this huge sprawling world. And I think that's kind of shows, they never even really explore the circus itself that much. Most of the adventures don't even take place in the circus. Again, it's not really a world-building show. And the last episode even went out of its way to kind of shoot down a bunch of fan theories, even if that necessarily wasn't, it was kind of just trying to further the story, but it was also showing that just assuming these things isn't always going to get us very far. And again, I think the point of that is that it's not really that important. What is important is what's happening now, not what happened in the past. Sorry, I was kind of rambling there. Then also, keep in mind, we have one episode left. I highly doubt they're going to do that much in terms of oh, this is what happened here, this is what happened there. What they're going to focus on is what's happening to the characters after the circus is kind of starting to decay. What are they going to do next? And how is their story going to end, quote unquote, now that Kane is out of the picture? Because as much as I would like to learn more about the past of the circus, I think the show is kind of going out of its way to only give us tiny little bits only when they're most relevant. And again, like I said, we only have one episode left. I highly doubt they're going to be able to fit too much more into another 30, 45 minute episode. Maybe the finale will be longer. That would probably make sense. But again, that should be time that they're spending on the characters, not on a past that isn't really relevant anymore. Also, I feel like Pomni's whole speech at the beginning about how they probably just need to accept that they're not getting out is kind of supposed to introduce that idea to a more casual audience, because obviously the people who have been hardcore following the series probably have kind of thought about that possibility, and how there's a good possibility they're not ever going to escape by the show's end, but maybe a more casual viewer may have not come to that conclusion, or maybe haven't heard some of those theories or speculations. So I feel like this was just the show's way of trying to kind of introduce that idea, so for the finale it can be kind of explored more. But again, as I've been saying, I don't really think speculating what's going to happen next month is really worth it, because as the last episode showed us, all of our ideas can be flipped on their head in an instant, so it might just be better to enjoy the ride in the here and now. Not that theorizing is bad, of course, I just mean, that's not something I'm going to do much of in this video. Because I would be a goddamn liar if I was telling you that I wasn't going to look at any theories after I'm done with this video, because I would be a liar. Anyways, that's pretty much all I want to say for now. I still want to give myself some time to think about more things. These are just the thoughts that I had right away that I wanted to get out into the world to get feedback on. So, thank you for listening, I guess. If you like this video, please consider commenting, and subscribing, all that jazz. I want to thank my channel members for their continued financial support, yada yada yada. I might make another video like this when the last episode of Amazing Digital Circus comes out. I might make another video about Amazing Digital Circus after I have some more time to think, and after I look at some theories and I'm able to form my own thoughts on them, and stuff like that. Because as you could probably tell, this video is kind of made on a whim. I don't even have a real script, I just have bullet points I'm reading off of cover this, cover that. So, again, I apologize if this isn't the most polished video ever. I just want to get my thoughts out there as quickly as I can while still maintaining some level of professionalism. I don't know. Now, if I had to give my thoughts on this episode in one sentence, I would only have to use 2 words.
Holy shit.